FLORA'S presents Decades Later, Missing Woman Comes Back to Tell the Police the Truth. August 3, 1975 started out typically for Flora and Robert Stevens. They both had their own to-do list for the day, which was typical for them. Flora had a doctor's appointment she booked the day before due to feeling like she had a cold. Her husband Robert had a long list of things that he had to do after dropping his wife off at the medical clinic. Robert dropped Flora off, expecting to pick her up in an hour. He had no idea when they left the house that he would be going home alone later. Flora was a 36-year-old woman who was full of life. She loved adventure and excitement. She worked at a lavish, hip resort called the Concord in the Catskills. It was a popular tourist attraction with 1,200 rooms for tourists to relax and unwind. She had taken August 3rd off from work because she was sick. When her husband finished up with his errands, he returned to the medical center to pick up his wife. She wasn't in the waiting room, so Robert assumed that she was still in with the doctor. When Robert was waiting for a long time, he went to talk to the receptionist to see what was taking so long. He was shocked when she told him that his wife was nowhere in the office. When Robert couldn't find his wife, he called the police. He hoped that they could figure out what happened to Flora from the time he dropped her off until the time that he returned to pick her up. The police wanted to be thorough, so they dug into Flora's past. They discovered she once attended Lincoln High School in New York. The detectives went to her place of business and learned just a tiny bit of information from her application. The detectives weren't getting any useful info, but they did know that she was married to a man named Robert who filed the missing persons report. They hoped that Robert could give them more information. When word of Flora's disappearance got out, nobody could figure out what had happened to her. Had she been kidnapped? Did she walk away from the clinic to start a new life? People in town started helping in the search. The more people got involved, the more curious they became. Flora was a very nice woman, so what could have happened to her? Back in 1975, it was much more challenging to find a missing person than it is today. Back then, they didn't have the internet for people to post photos of their missing loved ones. Also, they didn't have cell phones to see where the person last used it. And finally, in 1975, most people paid for things in cash, meaning no paper trail. The police didn't have access to security cameras, so they couldn't tell how Flora left or which direction she had gone. They were at a standstill in the investigation. As the days turned to weeks and the weeks turned to months, Flora's case was going cold. Soon they decided it was time to stop investigating. There were no leads, and it was becoming more and more apparent that they wouldn't find any either. Robert was devastated. He needed closure that was never coming, so he decided to move on with his life. There was nothing left for him to do at this point but to try to live his life without his bride. Jan Solomon, a senior investigator in New York, was reviewing old files from cases that had gone cold. In 2017, he looked at Flora's file and discovered something had been overlooked during the first investigation. As he read the file, Jan realized there was something familiar about Flora's case. He continued to comb through the evidence until he found something he hoped would finally solve the case. Jan didn't want to tell Flora's friends and family members that he may have found out what happened to the missing woman because he wanted to be sure first. Human remains had been discovered, and he didn't want to say anything about Flora until he knew if the remains belonged to her. For the next few days, Jan worked hard trying to put the pieces together. He made some phone calls to find out if the police knew who the remains belonged to. The first call he made was to the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office. He wanted to speak to a detective there and bring up the case. The detective told Jan that he found the remains of a woman in the Catskills area. The detective was more than willing to help. The two detectives realized that it wasn't going to be easy to figure out if the remains belonged to Flora, though. Every year, 70,000 women go missing in the United States, and with all of these missing women, Jan wondered what the chances were that it would be Flora. But he was determined to find out. In today's world, we have technological advances that obviously weren't available in the 1970s. When a person goes missing, the file's put into storage. Jan's first objective was to access the files to figure out if the body found belonged to Flora. There were 21,894 cases that were considered active, so Jan realized figuring out if the remains were Flora's specifically would not be easy. Jan knew it was too much work for one man, too, so he assembled a team to help him sort through all the missing cases. Jan hoped that with a little patience and a little luck, he'd be able to figure out who the human remains belonged to. Yan wanted to close the case, so with his team in place going through files, he decided to go to Sullivan County to do his own research. There, Yan found out the remains had come from a woman in Sullivan County. Soon, he managed to narrow his search down even further. Next, he asked his team to try and track down any living friends or relatives of the woman that he found. Because it had been so long, the team hadn't been able to track down anyone. Yan had a lot of time invested in this investigation, but he had no choice but to hand the case off. He asked Detective Rich Morgan from the Sullivan County Police Department to take on the case. He knew he couldn't figure it out on his own, even with his highly skilled team. Now it was up to Rich to connect FLORA'S case with the body that Yan located. It took him a while, and soon Rich managed to find a bit more information. He got a break in the case when he found the woman's identification badge. He finally had a name to match with the body that was recovered. The ID badge showed the woman worked in the Catskill Mountains, just like Flora. The woman also went missing around the same time as Flora. The more Rich dug up about the resorts in the Catskills, the more he realized that something sinister was going on there. Rich knew that it wasn't a coincidence that one dead woman from 1975 was found and there was still another one missing. To get to the bottom of the case, Rich had to keep digging. Flora's husband never stopped looking for her after she disappeared. He looked for clues for years, and sadly, he died 10 years after he reported her missing. He spent the rest of his life wondering what had happened to his wife. It was terrible news for Rich. With her husband's death and no living relatives, Rich wasn't sure where else to turn. The only thing that he had to go by now was by accessing county records and transcripts. Rich thought that accessing the Social Security database might give him some answers, and it was then he realized that Flora's Social Security number was still in use. Someone was using the same number assigned to Flora. But why? Rich tracked down where the Social Security number was being used. He contacted an assisted living facility located 250 miles away in a small town north of Boston, Massachusetts. After speaking to several members of staff, Rich found out that there was a woman at the home by the name of Flora. They also told Rich that Flora's last name wasn't Stevens, it was Harris. They told him that she'd been there since 2001. Rich knew the chances of this being Flora Stevens were still slim. He was sure that if somebody was using her identity, it'd be worth a trip, though, to the assisted living facility. He decided to make the trip because he wanted this decades-long case closed. He was sure it'd be worth it just to meet somebody with the same first name and birthday as the missing woman from the Catskills. Before making the trip to the small town near Boston, Rich asked a colleague to go along with him. He wasn't going to take any chances in cracking the case. He made sure to bring a photo of Flora Stevens along with him as well. When Rich and his colleagues got to the nursing home, they spoke to the woman using Flora's Social Security number. They showed her the old photo of Flora, and the woman said that that was a picture of her. She even pointed out who she called her ex-husband, Stephen, in the picture. Now they were sure the woman really was Flora Stevens. Sadly, Flora couldn't tell the police what happened to her the day she left the doctor's office because she had dementia. Even though they couldn't get the information they needed, they did finally find Flora. Decades later, a missing woman comes back to tell the police the truth. Unfortunately, they would never get the whole story. Subscribe for more.